So, good morning, friends. Once again, I welcome you all to this class of video lecture. This is BA Part 2nd, English Literature, Paper 1, and we have been doing Poetry and Drama, Paper 1 for last couple of days. And friends, as you know, that we are doing a very famous poem, My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. It's a dramatic monologue, and this is a poem like Shakespearean play, like Shakespearean tragedy. So before I come to the paraphrasing part of the poem, I just read out the opening lines of the poem so that you may resume well the text of the poem. That's my last duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will you please sit and look at her? I said, Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I, and seemed as they would ask me if they durst, how such a glance came there, so not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, it was not her husband's presence only called that sport of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mental lapse over my lady's wrist too much. So, friends, these are the opening lines, and in the previous class, we discussed the gist of the opening lines. The poem is a dramatic monologue. The scene of the meeting between the Duke and the court envoy is a drawing room of the Duke. The Duke, who is a widower, is negotiating marriage with a court's daughter. The Duke's previous wife is dead. The court's envoy visits the Duke with a fresh proposal of marriage, and the Duke takes him to his art gallery where there is a portrait of Duke's previous wife, who is now no more, who is dead. The Duke removes the curtain and shows him the portrait of his last duchess. So, friends, this is the setting of the poem. So, as the poem moves forward, what is the line of the thought? He draws his attention to the portrait of his last duchess, now dead. He calls it a portrait done by Friar Pandolf, and then qualifies his statement with the remark that he did so by design, because he had noticed that visitors were intrigued by the expression on the Duchess's face, and almost wanted to ask what caused it. Most of them restrained that curiosity because they dared not wound his feelings. The Duke means that often people, observing the expressions of passion on the Duchess's face, were suspicious of an affair between her and the painter. He generally therefore attributed the painting to one Friar Pandolf, since a clergyman's name would remove all suspicion. He was also particular that no one but he drew the curtain to display the portrait. In fact, the Duke has been that narrow minded person, has been full of envy and jealousy, has been highly a man of possessive nature, that when he wanted to portray the portrait of his wife, he could He couldn't rely on any renowned painter of the city, but for that task he invited a monk, since it is expected that a monk would not indulge in any, unwanted, in any unethical activity with his wife. So, this is the narrow mindedness being reflected in the poem. The poem shows us indeed a typical Renaissance character, typified, qualified by an unscrupulous and proud duke. Duke is proud, full of pride, full of arrogance, haughtiness. When he speaks about others, in fact, he is not speaking about others, while he is exposing his own character. Unscrupulous. Talking to the envoy of a count whose daughter he wishes to marry, the duke shows him the portrait of his previous wife, who is now dead. The duke tells the envoy that the sweet smiles on the lady's face were not for her husband alone. The bright redness visible on the lady's cheeks was very unique, right? Here, Browning writes in a very romantic way about the beauty and gorgeousness of the portrait. The Duke explains why the portrait of the Duchess has a blush on her cheeks. Many people think that the blush appeared on her cheeks because her husband, the Duke, was present there when the portrait was being made. The Duke tells the envoy that the blush on her face was not because he was present there. There was some other reason of it, perhaps some complimented by the artist, occasioned that happy spot on her face. The artist might have complimented her on her dress. It has been a sort of mystery. What was the reason behind the blushes on the face of the Duchess? Who made the beautiful compliment? So here the Duke says that it was not because of my presence. He never loved his wife. He never had a soft corner for his wife. He always suspected her. So he says that might be the artist happened to make this comment about her dress, and that comment must have brought the blush on the face of the Duchess. So this is how the poem continues, and I come again, my favor at her breast, that dropping of the daylight in the west, the bow of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush. At least she thanked man good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she thanked. So the pride and haughtiness and the typical psychic nature of the Duke continues to get reflected, and when we move forward in the poem. So the poet says that it was perhaps occasioned by some casual remark from the painter. He might have said that art could never reproduce the faint flush that half illumined the Duchess's face. The painter might have said that the blush was so lovely and yet so fleeting that it was impossible to capture it on canvas. The Duchess had a nature so easily pleased that even such a casual remark, one of formal courtesy, merely could make her blush with happiness. So this is the problem with the Duke. The Duke is not satisfied that even a minor remark made by the artist could invite blush on her face, and this is her concern. So, in this way, the poem continues, and the Duke is describing the nature of the Duchess. She was one who would be easily pleased. She had a very benevolent nature. She had a very merciful nature, a very kind hearted, wholehearted. Right? She used to thank each and everyone. She was broad minded. She had all the virtues of character and conduct, and this never pleased the Duke. So she was one who would be easily pleased. She found joy in everything around. Her smiling face was turned on all things. It never made any distinction between things or persons. Everything pleased her, the Duke, who couldn't appreciate such unselfish joy. Here speaks of it with implied contempt. But Browning finds in the Duchess a nature after his own heart, one which fully appreciates all the pleasures that life had to offer. The Duke was annoyed. You see, what is the reason behind the annoyance of the Duke? It is well expressed in the poem. The Duchess was graceful for the least kindness done to her, and when she thanked people, the Duke, though he didn't get angry at that, didn't however feel happy. Being absolutely unaffected by such feelings of gratitude towards others, the Duke naturally couldn't understand or appreciate her attitude. So, thank you, friends. We continue the poem in the next class.